So Bundesliga matchday 5 has happened and time to look back. So to start, obviously, Friday, Bayern played Bremen. They won 4-0. It was quite a comfortable win for Bayern as most people expected. This will be Harry Kane scored twice, won a penalty, and this made him the quickest player to reach 100 goals for a singular club, quicker than the likes of Ronaldo and Erling Haaland. But I think from a historical point of view, I'd like in the different tiers of Bayern strikers that have been and gone, Harry Kane will not be in the upper echelon of Robert Lewandowski and Gerd Müller. Obviously, longevity plays a part in that and what will have been achieved during that time period as well. But he'll be in like the second tier, like below the top. And if from like a purely aura and kind of like a vibes point of view, there's a chance that Harry Kane breaks Robert Lewandowski's 41 goal record. But from the pure number of penalties he takes a season, it's not going to match to the likes of Robert Lewandowski and what Gerd Müller did with the original record. Already Harry Kane's taken something ridiculous like 4 penalties and we're 5 games in. In the season that Lewandowski scored 41, he only took 7, or it was 8. And when Gerd Müller scored 40, he scored 3. And granted, this season Harry Kane is a lot better striker, or he's a lot better. He's more well-rounded and he just looks better. What would happen with Kane is, there'll be a period where he would literally ghost game and then he'll get a penalty and you score it and then everything will be good again. Like there can be times when Kane isn't at his best. He generally doesn't contribute to the team at all. Looking back at this time of Bayern in a couple of years' time, I don't think he'll be looked back at the same level as Müller and Lewandowski, and he'll be more in the lower tier of strikers that were there. Luca Toni, Jurgen Klinsmann, players like that. But again, though, like Bayern are very boring to watch, and currently, like the Bundesliga looks quite boring. If you take into consideration Bayern, the Bundesliga is quite boring. But I think on the flip side, it's also just a testament to the work that Vince Kompany's done, that he's made them so dominant. Very hard to think, when could they possibly lose? But again, like it just doesn't. It's not a good look for the league. The Bayern are just steamrolling everyone. But for Bremen, there's obviously some positives to take away from this. They managed to hold Bayern quiet for 22 minutes before they scored. But defensively, there's stuff to take away from, like Karl Hein, who replaced Mio Backhaus in goal, was a good replacement, and he could potentially become the number 1 now. And but apart from that, it was always expected that Bremen were going to lose this game. So it's more or less a free hit for them. When it comes to the only team that could probably challenge Bayern, it currently looks like it's Dortmund. They beat Mainz 2-0. Again, it was an uneventful game for Dortmund, which is becoming a bit more common. But most importantly, they're able to do it without Serhou Guirassy, who picked up an injury before kickoff and had to be replaced by Julian Brandt. So the fact that they were able to again navigate this like they did Wolfsburg last week with very little problems or any warning signs again shows that Dortmund are looking like the only team that can challenge Bayern for the title. Dortmund shows not only can they be a team that looks after the ball more, but they can also be lethal on the counter, as saw with both of their chances, with Karim Adeyemi being the main threat for Dortmund in this game. Obviously, Dortmund have a very good front three. It's Guirassy, who is one of the best strikers in the league. And then you've got this pace and speed with Karim Adeyemi and Maxi Bayer as well. And it's all worked quite well so far. And so Kovac's work is clearly a positive. And now that game against St. Pauli looks like, usually with the previous Dortmund, it would be that game against St. Pauli is the norm. Dortmund are comfortably in the lead and they throw it away. But now that game looks like the outlier because Dortmund are able to handle games a lot calmly now and are in a lot more control. And it's also helped that the fact that Nico Schlotterbeck has returned as well. Whether Dortmund can actually challenge Bayern for the title will be seen this weekend when they play Leipzig, which is their first proper test, in the league. As well as the fact they have to juggle a Champions League game in midweek as well, whereas Leipzig do not have one. Whereas for Mainz, again, they've kind of struggled so far in the opening stages of the season. Obviously, Jonathan Burkhardt leaving is a main part of that. But what doesn't help is that on Thursday they do start their Conference League games. And if this team is struggling with just the Bundesliga at the moment, then the addition of the Conference League could probably make this team struggle even more. Leverkusen also won. They beat St. Pauli 2-1. St. Pauli obviously have proven to be a bit of a difficult team to play against. I mean, in this fixture last season, St. Pauli were the reason. They basically ended Leverkusen's title defence. So Leverkusen showed like much needed grit, like defensively in this game again. Like so far in the early stages under Kasper Heumann, they've been a lot more defensive than they have been attacking. Obviously, he hasn't had the time yet to instill a style of play, but ultimately they're continuing to move forward now. A win is a win at the end of the day, but they are still lacking in attack. I mean, as I said previously, they have all these, like this attacking wealth at their disposal, but they're not using it to their desire that they should be. It doesn't help that Patrick Schick has now gone off injured, but before then he's kind of looked non-existent. So now, like, you have to think of a creative way to fill that gap and make use of the attacking talent you have at your disposal. Again, Leverkusen also now have a midweek game in the Champions League. You would expect them to play a lot better than not only in this game, but also in the previous Champions League game as well, where they needed a late goal to draw with Copenhagen. Another team that keeps on winning is Leipzig. I think it's now clear that the Bayern game came a bit too early for them, because now they've won 4 in a row. They're beginning to build chemistry and piece things together under Ole Werner. Wolfsburg weren't an easy side to play against either. They put on so much pressure in the second half, but Leipzig managed to handle it and deal with it. And as their attack builds chemistry and stuff, Johan Bakayoko currently looks like their standout player. I mean, he's now scored 2 goals in 2 games and seems to be like the driving force behind this attack. Obviously, the difference between this Leipzig attack and the previous one, not only the lack of egos, but they also look like a coherent unit, and you have no one kind of getting each other's way because they're all completely different players. Or they are not getting in each other's way, which is the main thing. So when you had Šeško, Openda and Simmons, they would all kind of try to occupy similar spaces. And so others would have to be shoehorned into a position so they can play. In this situation, you have Yan Diomande on the left, Romelu in attack, and then Bakayoko on the right. And they just work well together. Obviously, Diomande is probably still the rawer of the 3, because he's only 18. But as things stand now, Bakayoko has been the driving force in this attack as they continue to grow as a team. Heidenheim won their first game of the season. They beat Augsburg 2-1. And so now it's raised questions about Sandro Wagner. Like, when I watch Augsburg, the question is, what is their actual style of play? What's the point of this? You know, what are they actually trying to achieve? Because in the opening 5 games, there's not really a key point you can point out and be like, okay, this is how Augsburg play. This is what they're good at. This is what they're bad at. And so far, there's no clear signs of what they're actually trying to achieve. Obviously, you beg the question, what's the point of Augsburg as a whole? Which is also true. Clearly, there are teething problems. Clearly, the wins against Freiburg and then the win again, or the good performance against Bayern really makes you think okay, were they flukes? And now you're really questioning what are Augsburg actually doing? So they're definitely a team to watch out for, to see if 1, they stick with Wagner, and 2, if Wagner can actually come up with a coherent and recognisable, most importantly, style of play. On Saturday evening was probably the most craziest game of the season, and it will be the game of the season, and it's only the 5th game of the season. And that was Borussia Mönchengladbach 4, Eintracht Frankfurt 6. Yes, you did hear me correctly. Frankfurt were 5-0 up at half-time, just because Gladbach's defence was so non-existent that they basically were more or less able to just run straight to goal. That's how poor Gladbach were defensively. I mean, Canuzin got on the score sheet, Jonathan Burkhardt as well, Ansgar Knauf, Robin Koch scored a double, Faris Chaibi as well. Obviously, Chaibi has kind of had a bit of a revival in his Frankfurt career. When he played, there were promising signs. And in his second season, he struggled and lost his place in the starting 11. But this season, he's reinvented himself and he's now found himself in a slightly different role, but it's clearly working. And he's clearly delivering on the promise that he showed when he first arrived from Toulouse. Obviously, Chanuzin, again, like he's basically being involved with a goal or an assist in one way or another every single week now. And this is the Chanuzin season. Well, obviously for Gladbach, this was their second game under head coach Eugen Polanski, and there was positives against Leverkusen last week, and any goodwill Gladbach built up was basically gone within half an hour of this game. They made 2 first half substitutions. Florian Neuhaus came on in the first half, and these weren't like injury related, they were purely tactical because of how poor the players have been. So Gladbach turned things around, but basically did nothing. Because then going into the second half, within 50 minutes, they were 6-0 down. And there was a moment where you thought, okay, mate. So the highest scoring game in the Bundesliga, or the biggest loss in the Bundesliga, was Borussia Mönchengladbach against Borussia Dortmund. Gladbach beat Dortmund 12-0. And that happened on the final day of the season because Gladbach were trying to win the title against Cologne and they had to close this goal difference gap. And that's why they ran riot. But you were really thinking, like, if things continue as they are, Frankfurt could very well beat this. But like after that, Gladbach managed to rally and turn things around. But it was all a bit too late. Like if they started scoring slightly earlier in the second half, you could plausibly think that they could have scored. They could have came back from 6-0 down, which is a crazy thing to say. Ultimately, Gladbach won the second half 4-1. Jens Kastrup, Haris Tabakovic, Yannick Engelhardt, and Grant Leon Ramos basically kind of all scored, but also kind of show the state Gladbach were in, as in the past 3 years they've all played in the second division. Ultimately, like, it's quite hard for someone to be a winner from this game for Gladbach, but the winner is most likely Polanski, because it just showed how much of a shit show Gladbach is at the moment. Most notably above Polanski as well as below him with the players, but he was able to show ruthlessness when needed, like to go, okay, this isn't working, let's pull off the underperforming players early so it doesn't get worse. And then he managed to somehow rally the team that they ended up scoring 4 in the second half. But ultimately the players are the losers as well. None of them are really good enough. And it also just showcases that Gladbach are kind of rotting from the inside out. Most notably, it's like the likes of Roland Verkes, Rainer Bonhoff, Sascha Stegemann. Like, it's got to the point now where, like, for Gladbach to move forward, these people also have to go, as well as you can't just keep putting the blame on the head coach now. The people above the head coach will also have to leave. And Gladbach need to make these decisions sooner. They also need to decide whether they keep Polanski or hire a different head coach. And they need to make these decisions sooner rather than later, because they haven't won a game yet this season. And if things continue going this way, they could be relegated. And they will be the next big team in line to have had to go down to the second division and reset before going back up again. And considering the state that Gladbach are in at the moment, if they did get relegated, there is no guarantee they could bounce straight back up, like Cologne. They could be more like Schalke, Hertha Berlin, or even Hamburg, and be stuck there for longer than they would like if things don't change quickly. But for Frankfurt, as great as they are going forward, they continue to show defensive fragility. They're not really mature enough to see out a game and manage the game. Yeah, you were 6-0 up, so you can think, okay, do you really need to manage it? When it got to 6-3, you're kind of thinking, okay, let's kill this game off here and now. Let's make sure we come away with the win. So because this is quite a young team, they're obviously still quite immature in this regard, but this is a skill they really need to learn sooner rather than later. Then on Sunday, really boring. Freiburg drew 1-1 with Hoffenheim. Fisner Kaslani scored again. He's had a very good start to the season and showed why a loan system can work. He spent time with Elversberg and now he's getting his chance with the first team and it's bearing fruit. I wouldn't be surprised if next season he ends up at a bigger Bundesliga side. But this game also showed that Hoffenheim are no longer crap, which is a bit of a shame. The only game that did see a team win was Cologne versus Stuttgart. Stuttgart beat them